All right. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I am super excited to give this presentation because .NET Aspire is one of my favorite technologies. And I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see if that's working. Seems to be working. Here we go. How's that? All right. You can see my
Yeah, we
screen?
can see it. Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. Yeah, so I'm going to give this. I have watched so much content on .NET Aspire, and everybody struggles to define what it is, and so including the folks on the team. So I'm going to struggle just like everybody else. It's a little bit hard, but I'm going to break it down in four main areas. The fact that it reduces complexity, increases resiliency, it improves observability, and it increases your modularity. So I'm going to dig into complexity first, and oh, yep. There we go. Okay. So, yeah, so my name's Lee Richardson. I've been doing consulting, .NET, well, not .NET, but I've been doing software development in the DC area for 25 years now. I run the CAP area, .NET user group. I'm Microsoft MVP, and I work for an awesome company called Inferno Red, and they are, to Ari's point, they are hiring. So if you are a senior iOS developer and you're looking for work, ping me afterwards because this is a great company, 100% work from home, and you get to work with a lot of smart people, which is really nice. They only hire senior developers. So after 25 years of doing software development, I've definitely seen complexity in a variety of different worlds. So I'm curious. DCOM was sort of the world when I started into software development in 1999. So I'm just curious, who all says this looks familiar to you? Got any, got anybody? Google Beta look familiar? Ask Jeeves, yeah, Troy. Um, yeah, the
Four people
eBay,
raised their hand in here.
yeah, yeah,
I
cool,
can't
cool.
speak for online. It looks like two people raised their hand online.
Nice, nice. Yep. AOL.com. So yeah, so the question is like, was there complexity back in 1999? Like, yeah, of course there was. It was just a different type of complexity. So this was kind of how things looked when I started because we still had to scale things up. Scalability was still a big deal. We still had computers that, these things ran on and they could only handle so many requests at a time. And so we would break things out by putting things in the database tier, and we had stored procedures. Remember when stored procedures was like the thing that you would do? Um, and there were data access tiers, and then there was visual interdev. I still have an MCP on my listed somewhere. I have a certification for visual interdev, Visual Basic. So that was the world back in 1999, and there was complexity then. But complexity has really, really changed since the cloud, I guess. And so I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of different projects, and one of the more interesting ones was about 8, 9 years ago, and this was right when Kubernetes was getting huge. So Kubernetes, I'm curious, who has worked on like a container orchestrator style project like Kubernetes? Is it popular in this group? Got Tim. Got a couple folks. Cool.
Two people raised their hand here.
Okay, cool. So this was sort of like the original problem that .NET Aspire set out to solve was the complexity with these kinds of architectures. Now, I'm going to tell you my current project is nowhere near as complicated, and I'm still getting a lot of benefits from .NET Aspire, but I'm going to talk about that later because first, before we get to that, it really helps to, I think, understand the core problem that .NET Aspire was set out to solve. So I don't know. Is interactivity work well here, or should I just like talk? Because I'm curious. Like when I do this talk in person, I always like to have some dialogue with folks. And so, like, why would you use microservices?
Oh, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just getting my steps in, going back and forth. Uh, does anyone have, so let me know if you need to ask people. And then there's people in the chat that are also mentioning. I can look at that and let you know what they say so that you don't have to keep switching. Uh, Shravan says interaction is gold. So
Interaction. Yeah.
interaction is a form of currency. Everyone cool with interactive? Cool. All right. I can still see everyone. We turned the lights down. And then Sean Feldman is typing. Microservices means micro bugs. Hopefully so small.
Microbugs.
Hopefully so small that you don't have to pay attention to those.
Yeah, there's resiliency, which is part of it. So in terms of microbugs, one of the things that can be really nice about a microservices architecture is you've got all of your microservices are broken down into individual little sections, and if a bug pops up, the orchestrator like detects that maybe one of the pods broke and it'll kill it and restart it. And that just happens like automatically for you. And that can be really nice if it ran out of memory or something that you don't have to, just outside of your control. So that's one benefit. Um, Scalability is a huge one for me. So this was the architecture that I was on the project that I was working on. And so hopefully it's not too small for the in-person folks, but the main entry point was up here. Oh, and I moved my mouse and you can't really see it very well, but yeah, the main entry point was up here for users in the browser. And this was a fintech project. And so people generally were really interested in this project when the markets closed. So the markets would close at whatever 4:30, and then like everybody would jump into this app. And so all of a sudden we had this huge usage spike at like 4:35 Eastern time. And that was like the needs of the system were really, really high right then. And then the rest of the day, like pretty much hardly anyone would ever use it. So that was like a great example of the ability to like spike up certain parts of your app. And then similarly, like this vendor data, like at the end of the day, at around midnight, 1, 2 a.m., we would get a huge dump of like an enormous amount, like this huge CSV file. It was like a 500 gig CSV file or something like that, of every single trade that happened over the course of the day. And so then we would have to download that to an SFTP server, and we would process that with there's like this covariance calculator pod, which would basically do a bunch of math on it. And so that was like another section of the app that needed to be able to scale at a completely different time. So this was like a really good candidate for microservices. Similarly, uh, this covariance calculator over here, this pod over here, this was written in a different language. It was all written in R because the quant, the mathematician on this project, he didn't speak C sharp. He didn't know JavaScript. Like he knew MATLAB and R. And well, he didn't even really know R, but he was willing to learn it because MATLAB turns out it's really, really expensive to license. So anyway, so that's another benefit to microservices architecture is you can have multiple different languages all running in one project. So this was actually like kind of an ideal project for microservices. It hit had the scalability, it had the multiple languages, it had the resiliency. And so, we had to handle like what happens, how do you determine that this pod right here is still alive? And so there was an orchestrator detecting if things were still alive and restarting them. So that's like some of the benefits of Kubernetes, at least on this project. I've also heard theoretically that there's a huge benefit that you can deploy independently. So this project, not so huge, but like if you're, Amazon and you have like a gigantic thing with a whole bunch of stuff, you don't necessarily want to deploy your entire project all at once. Maybe you just made a change to the covariance calculator pod. And so you just want to do a deploy just to this one little section and not have to deploy everything makes it like a lot safer, especially if you like guarantee that it doesn't affect any of the other parts of your system. So that's another big benefit to microservices. Yeah, Shrin.
Uh, Really, I have a quick question. So, are you suggesting that all the microservices within this ecosystem could be controlled or orchestrated using a Kubernetes pod?
They were a bunch of different pods and they were all orchestrated with in a Kubernetes cluster. So this was like one big cluster here.
Okay. And is there, maybe we are deviating a little bit, but I just wanted to ask when you're able to answer it, you can determine that. But uh, so a bunch of, is there a mapping between number of microservices to a pod or multiple pods, or I'm just trying to wrap my head around this idea.
Cool. Yeah, I could talk about this all day. It's not directly related to .NET Aspire, but yeah,
Yeah.
so the way that it works is each one of these, I called it a pod, but technically there is a service in front of each one of these, and the pods themselves scale. And so when you're connecting from the traffic manager up here into your SFTP pod or whatever, for instance, you actually connect through a service, and then the service does generally a round robin to get to a whole series of pods. And so when you're scaling, you can say, oh, I want one pod or I want five pods, and you don't need to worry about that from other pods when you're connecting from one pod to another. You just connect to the service, and then it deals with the like which pod to connect to.
Within a pod, it can have multiple microservices, or in this reference architecture that you're showing, you have one microservice per pod.
One microservice per each one of these things that I'm calling a pod that might actually, in reality, be multiple pods.
Right.
So
When
yes,
when it scales.
when it scales.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my definition of a microservice because there's one section of so the host is a C sharp here. This host pod was like
Okay.
a DLL basically. Well, a bunch of DLLs, but that set of
Correct.
DLLs all existed on one pod. If you scale it up to two pods, that set of DLLs now exists on two pods. So it's
Right.
one microservice in that case, two pods, one service.
Right. Okay. Correct. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, that'll actually be helpful to explain that just a little bit later when I get into the complexities of ports. So, all right. So that's like a big complicated microservices architecture. So we've talked about some of the pros. How about some of the cons? I'll go ahead and give you
Complexity.
yeah, totally, totally. Oh my gosh, so complicated. Um, Yeah. So, and with all of that complexity, like it's very hard to get people onboarded onto a project of that complexity. Managing all of your environment variables and all of your secrets across all of these different pods is very complicated. If you do it all with like PowerShell, you end up just writing enormous amounts of PowerShell. I had to learn so much about networking that I never ever really wanted to know. Like I consider myself a developer and I didn't want to have to know all this, but like I had to learn a lot about VNets because each one of those pods, as you scale, uses IP addresses, and you only have so many IP addresses, and so you have to know a lot about all of that. You have to deal with health checks and how to determine whether pods are up or not, and how to the difference between a pod that's like unhealthy and one that's dead. And debugging is just very, very hard because you have to, you often end up having to remote into one pod and then remote over to another one to find the logs. It's a very complicated thing, and I would not recommend anyone take on microservices unless you really have a compelling reason to. Like, definitely do not do Kubernetes because it's cool, ever, please.
Made it.
What was that?
We lost connection in the room.
Oh no.
Oh, did we lose a connection? Yes, sir. Oh, did it go to sleep? That's awesome. Do we still have you?
I'm
Lee?
here. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, there, sweet. I'll just have to stay on here and make sure it doesn't do that. I don't know why it did that. It tried to go to sleep. I don't know what. It's plugged in. Oh, maybe
People don't-
you know what? Maybe it's not plugged in. That might be a broken. No, you see, it's not showing that it's powered. It's. Oh. You can keep going, Lee. I'll figure out the power thing. There we
Okay.
go.
People,
Right now.
yeah, people don't realize it, but hosting meetups is a lot harder than people realize. All right. So
Yep,
yeah,
we're
so
plugged in now. Boom.
sweet.
Yeah.
All right, keeping going.
Right
So
before.
these are some of the problems with microservices. Talking about complexity, there's this site called landscape.cncf.io, which like tracks all of the different microservices, plugin that you can use, and then they put it in this huge chart, which ends up being really nice for like clickbait for presentations, which just really demonstrates, I think, the complexity of the microservices architectures. There's a lot of different plugin capabilities of things that you can do in a microservices framework. It is very complicated. So enter .NET Aspire. I would have loved it if .NET Aspire were available on this project that I was working on. So here's where we get to the definition. So the official definition is it's an opinionated, cloud-ready stack for building observable, production-ready, distributed applications. It's a bit complicated, but it's an acceptable definition. My definition is a little more, I guess I would say, pragmatic. When you add Aspire to a project, you generally get two new projects in your solution, in the .NET world anyway. They've been expanding to not be just .NET focused anymore, but I'm going to be .NET focused on this presentation. So you get an app host and you get a service defaults project. And so you get different capabilities with each of those. And you don't have to have both. You can have just one or the other if you want. If you wanted to just add an app host, you could do that. If you wanted to just add the service defaults, you could do that. So the app host you can think of as a starter for all of the projects in your solution. So if someone used Docker Compose, Docker Compose fans, Docker Compose is great if you got a bunch of containers. Aspire basically replaces Docker Compose. You don't need that anymore. You can set up all of your containers just inside of the app host, and you hit F5 once, and it just starts everything up. It starts up all your projects. And when you have a complex microservices architecture, this can be a godsend because you have to, on more complicated projects, I mean, even on relatively simple ones where you have a back end and a front end, maybe you have an Angular app, you have to start the Angular app, and then you have to start your back end app, right? That's two different things. Well, Aspire is like, we got this covered. We got all of your projects. Hit F5 once, and it loads everything in debugging, all working together. It's really nice. So that's the app host, and then so the way it looks is it looks like this. Once you're running, it starts a dashboard. And this is what the dashboard looks like, and it'll show you all of the different pieces of your project. So if I'd run this on my project from many years ago, that fintech project, I would have seen basically for everything that was a pod in that architecture diagram I showed, I would have had a different line here in this. And then I would be able to jump directly to that endpoint. I'd be able to see the logs. I'd be able to see the interactions between all of those pods. It's fantastic. It's absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to show more about that later. But the way that works is if you dig into the app host's code, it looks like this. It's saying, okay, I want a Redis container, and I'm just going to add a Redis container, and then I'm going to add a backend. So this is a backend here, which references my Redis cache, and I'm going to have a front end here, which is a store, which references my backend. And so you can see it's strongly typed, nicely documented C# code that is like just really easy to read. So that's a brief overview of the app host. And then the service defaults is Microsoft.NET has been around for a long time, right? And there's a lot of different ways to do things. And the Microsoft dev team has opinions about the ways that you should do things. Maybe you're not doing them now, but basically service defaults is the idea that you're setting all of the knobs in your project the way that they recommend that you set them to. And you can customize it. You don't have to take what they want. So this is kind of how it looks. The service defaults is like they're going to configure health checks for you, service discovery, resiliency, and open telemetry. And I'll get into all of these things in more detail. But one of them I just wanted to point out because it's relevant to that microservices project, and that is service discovery. So When you turn on service discovery, normally, this is, remember I was talking about services and pods. So I didn't actually cover services in the previous diagram, but every single one of these pods has basically a service that you connect to it. And so this is what the ports looked like on that project. I had to deal with a lot of different ports because a service has a port and pods have ports. And so connecting to all of these different things with like a localhost 9802, localhost 7090, localhost 80. And that was just how you connected. You kind of had to know. I was constantly referring to a diagram like this because I had to just know what the ports were because there are no names for anything. Service discovery gives names to everything, which is absolutely wonderful. So instead of, you might normally, if you were connecting in .NET to an endpoint, you might normally do something like, okay, add HTTP client for product service, and then you would say builder.configuration product endpoint. So that's like the normal way you would do these things. And then that goes into your app settings and pulls in your product endpoint, which has a URL of localhost 5228. Instead of that, you can say, I want to add an HTTP client. So I'm using my builder pattern to set up the connection. And now I'm saying my base address is HTTP plus HTTPS or HTTPS plus HTTP, which is a weird syntax, right? It may look a little weird. And then / product. So no port number. You're just referring to things by name. And this syntax with HTTPS plus HTTP is saying, I'd like to use HTTPS if it's available. If it's not available, it's okay to fall back to HTTP, which is really helpful in development environments. And so, and then where does this products come from? Where does this word instead of the port, where does that come from? Well, you define that back in your app host when you set up your project. So when I defined my add project products and there was this magic string here, products here, that is giving it a name that if you turn on service discovery, then you can use that name right here to connect to this backend. Digging into that just a little bit more, you might be wondering, well, how do you set up your app settings? If you just deploy, I'm getting into deployment just a little bit. If you deploy Aspire normally, this happens for you automatically. You don't need to worry about it. But if you've got an existing project and you're just deploying the way that you always had, instead of having the connection string the way it had been, you can say there is a service, its name is products. For HTTPS, this is how you connect to it. For HTTP, this is how you connect to it. This is details you don't necessarily need to know, but this is how it works in the back end if you're curious about the implementation of that. And if that's
There's
if that's
little
too,
bit of a typo.
what's that?
There was a typo on localhost.
Ah, nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. I was making sure you're paying attention. And
Now you know why it wasn't working.
There should definitely be
interactive debugging.
a colon. That's fantastic. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yep. Yep. Glad you're paying attention. That's awesome. So yeah, you don't need to worry about the service discovery if that doesn't interest you. That's maybe some too much detail, but I think it's just kind of neat. That's part of the service defaults. So that kind of hopefully gives you kind of an overview of what .NET Aspire is and how it would be used on a microservices project. But you don't have to use it on microservices projects. My current project is a monolith, and we're using Blazor. Any Blazor fans? Any Blazor fans?
Yeah.
Yeah, love Blazor. It's fantastic. So we're using Blazor pretty much exclusively Blazor server because this is for a company this is their backend service, and so they don't need to worry about scalability, and there's always connected, it's always on. So why not keep it real simple? So their architecture looks like this. There's a UI layer, an app service layer, domain service layer, and it's all in one app service. Like by comparison, it is like, I mean, actually, this project is like almost 1 million lines of code. It's huge, but architecturally, it's really, really simple. And we've been using Aspire, and I love it. I absolutely love it, and it's not just for big microservices projects. And I'll get into why that is, but a lot of it is about it's going to be about the uh, the ability to see the data, the observability. But let me just talk a little bit more about runnable documentation, because that's a huge benefit too. So this used to, does this look like something that you guys have? You guys have README files on your projects, and they're kind of big and complicated. And so this is how ours used to look. Our README used to be like, okay, we got this mock project to simulate to simulate one of the services that we can integrate with, and you got to set up a connection string and do the here's a connected to the SQL and all that. Here's just one little section that's interesting. So do you guys know SMTP for Dev? Anyone have to have an app that sends emails? Yeah. Awesome. I often don't get a lot of people that say yes. I love SMTP for Dev. If you're not familiar, wonderful little tool which will basically set up a little SMTP server for you and an HTTP website. And anytime it sends emails, it detects that the email was sent and then shows it for you in a nice little dashboard, and you can see the emails and you can click on them. You can see who that would have been sent to and who it would have been sent from and what the body was, and it formats it all like it actually would be on an HTML if it was rendered in HTML. Really nice. So we used to have instructions that were like, hey, you should, to run this project, if you're getting new on this project, you're getting started, you should probably run .NET tool install -G, SMTP for Dev, and then you have to remember to run SMTP for Dev to start the tool, and there's some instructions about how to do that. Okay, so that is okay, but we can do better with .NET Aspire. So with .NET Aspire, we just did this. Once we Aspirified our app, we did builder.add-container. So previously it was a .NET tool, but I checked and there was a container. So why not use the container? So this is just add container. This is giving the container a name. This is the image that we want to pull down, and with endpoint. So we're going to say port 25 is going to connect to 25. So that maps that, and then we don't want to expose this on 80. We want to expose it on a custom port. So internally within the container, it's going to be listening on port 80, but external to the container, we're going to expose that on port 5000. And now we can just remove that entire section out of our README getting started, because when someone starts on our project, they just start with Aspire, hit F5, and SMTP for Dev automatically Aspire downloads the Docker image, starts up the container, sets it all up with all of the ports already, and we can just simplify that entire section out of the README. And in fact, the more you start using Aspire, the more you find that your README file for getting started on your project gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point that when new people join your project, they just have to hit F5 and everything just works. And it is just a wonderful onboarding experience. It can be really, really, really nice. And so if I were to start on an existing project that was .NET Aspired, it would just be a sigh of relief, because if you've ever started on an existing project, and sometimes you take an entire day, and sometimes it takes an entire week to get up to speed and get all the bits and pieces all working together. But with Aspire, just hit F5. Yeah, was there a question there?
Yeah. Hey, on where it says RN Wood, where it specifies the image, is that just a known list of images, or would you have to upload that? I'm not a Kubernetes guy, so I'm just curious, where's that image come from that it just knows, like Ron Wood /SMTP for Dev?
Yeah.
Huh? Oh, okay. So that's just part of the catalog.
Yeah, he'll list it. He lists it in his
Okay.
documentation. So
Got
if you
it.
go to the
So it's just part of the
documentation,
documentation or the directory of
Yeah.
available things.
Yep.
It's like you
Yep.
did.
Yeah, and it's not even Kubernetes. Like Kubernetes is for like orchestrating all of your containers. This is just a container without any orchestration. So
Oh, okay.
it's probably in here somewhere.
Cool.
Yeah, I already started over. But yeah, anyway, that's just yeah, you can also get it from the container. Oh, and when you have Docker, it's really fun to watch it do this. But if you start up your Docker desktop, there it is. that was from my project run today. So that was my pod. Started it right up for there. And it's neat when you delete all of your images and containers and you hit F5 on a project and you just watch Aspire automate Docker. It's kind of neat to watch it, like download the image, start up the container, connect it all up. It's neat. All right.
And would you have to have Docker installed for that to work? Oh,
You
okay.
would.
So yes. Or what? Podman? Okay.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Does Aspire work with Podman?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, it does.
I
I don't
I
know
have a
what-
feeling there's people that know Aspire better than I do, which is just fine. Yeah, if I say anything wrong, just correct me. Who was that? Was that someone in person?
Yeah, that's in person.
Awesome. All right. That is complexity. And I think that is hopefully that gives you a sense of how complexity can be reduced when you think about your README files getting substantially smaller, when you think about the number of, having to deal with a whole bunch of ports and being able to deal with names instead.
Oh, and
All
there's
right.
a comment. There's a comment from Tim Coker. It's ultimately going to come from Docker Hub. If anyone's interested in really getting deep with Docker, there's a Go utility called Dive that shows how it was built in all its layers.
Cool. Love it. I have yeah, I've also got on my YouTube channel, I've got a like a how Docker works. It's a little old, but all right, let's get into resiliency. So who's heard of a Chaos Monkeys? Chaos Monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. So a couple figs. So this was a tool that was released by Amazon. They used it internally first, and I had last time I gave this presentation, I'd memorized the date that they set this up, and I've already forgotten. I should have put it in the slides, but it was early 2000s, I think. And the idea was that how when there's like network outages and stuff like that, our system should be resilient enough that it just like automatically self-heal. That's a good system should be able to do that. So what if we built in things that would just break things randomly and put it into production? And that's what Amazon did. They were confident enough in their resiliency of their application that they put a chaos monkey into production, and it would just break things, and they would monitor it and make sure that it would restart. Like, who here would say you're confident enough with your apps that you would be willing to do that? I'm not. Not at all.
I would in some cases.
Really? Nice. That's fantastic. In production.
Shravan thinks that Netflix created Chaos Monkeys.
I could be mistaken.
Chaos Monkey concept.
Yeah, I just checked it up and yeah, it says online.
Netflix around 2010.
Around
Netflix
2010.
2010. So now we know.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is what one might look like if you were to write it in C#. So this is a middleware component. And so this middleware component is whenever a HTTP request is received, if there's a random number above 0.6, then it's just going to throw an exception. Look like a good chaos monkey to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to show this in production. I'm going to show this in a demo just a little bit later. So that's what a chaos monkey might look like. So as far as how you might deal with something like this in the .NET world, how about Poly's a good solution for something like this, right? Yeah.
Now.
Poly's fantastic. I gave this presentation a couple months ago, and actually in the audience was the maintainer of Poly, and so I was like, "Anyone use Poly?" And like someone was like, "Yeah, actually, I created it." I was like, "Oh, fantastic." That was awesome. So that was in the Virginia Beach area. So yeah, if you have not heard of Poly, it is a absolutely fantastic library that was originally not part of the .NET framework that would allow you to define policies and say when an error occurs, wait, retry, wait a little longer, retry, wait a little longer after that, retry, now stop. So you can define those policies and absolutely wonderful tool. And yeah, so it was released in .NET Core 2.1 in 2018. And so these policies look a little bit like this. So this is a transient HTTP error policy that you're setting up. And so you're saying, I want you to retry 3 times. Real simple policy here. So they like built this into the .NET framework. So you could in .NET 8, you didn't need to write this code. Like who here actually is writing code like this for like across everything? Maybe not everyone, but you should maybe be doing this. Configure HTTP client defaults, and that sets all of your HTTP requests, all of your outgoing HTTP requests to use a standard resilience handler. And that has just a bunch of best practices built into it for a given uh, service. So that's really cool. But then, hang on. Oh, hang on. Yeah, okay. So this was released in .NET 8. So they now recommend that you just call .add standard resilience handler, and it will automatically set up all of the best practices. And so that includes the following 5 strategies. First, they put in a rate limiter. They put in a total timeout, a retry, a circuit breaker, an attempt timeout. And so part of the thing that they're trying to do is imagine you have a microservices framework and you're making an outgoing request, and that service goes down. And now you've got a bunch of pods and they all detect that it's down, and then they start waiting and retrying and waiting and retrying. And all of a sudden, you're basically doing a denial of service against that external service. So a rate limiter will limit the maximum number of concurrent requests being set to the dependency. So that helps reduce the problem of making denial of service attacks inadvertently. And there's a timeout, so it'll set the max timeout to 30 seconds, max retries to 3 with an exponential backoff. And then the circuit breaker will block execution if too many direct failures or timeouts are detected. So that's also part of the getting rid of denial of service attacks. And then an attempt timeout. So these are all of the policies that are put in place by default. So maybe everyone's using this on your projects, maybe not, but you really should be. Like you should probably be doing configure HTTP client defaults. And so when I said one of the things Aspire does is like set all of the knobs the way Microsoft recommends that they get set, this is one of the things that gets turned on by default. I'll talk about it in just a little bit more detail, but that is part of the resiliency that you get with Aspire. They also set up health checks by default. So this is all part of the service defaults project. And you own this code. So like you can change it however you want. This is just when you start a new Aspirifying your project, this is the code that you get. And so it's going to add health checks and give you the ability to give you an endpoint for /alive. And I don't know, maybe this matters to you, maybe it doesn't. But if you wanted to add a custom health check, here's an example of how you can add a health check which detects that if your total memory usage is over 100 megs, 100K? I don't know. If your memory is high, then this will say that your service, if anyone hits the end, the /health endpoint, then it will give them an unhealthy response. So that's kind of cool. All right, that is resiliency. But where I get really excited is observability. Observability is super, super cool. So OpenTelemetry. In case you are not familiar with OpenTelemetry, there is it solves a problem. So once you've got good resiliency, the errors no longer are visible to customers, right? They're going to hit this app, which I don't know, maybe it's time to show this in a demo. I don't know if it's time to give a demo or a couple more slides, but um, imagine you hit this and yeah, let's actually just do it. So I'm gonna jump over here. So I have this deployed up to Azure, and I hit this, and you can see it's see there, they like sat there, and it's like taking a long time to pull back all of the products there, and that's actually because a Chaos Monkey got in there and messed up the requests, and so um, I'll show this example more later, but you can't see that the errors are occurring. So now it's especially important that you have good logs and you can see how things are happening and why they're happening. Okay, so performance problems and invisible errors in production are more important because you're less likely to have customers tell you about issues. So people traditionally solve this problem with an APM, right? So who here uses App Insights as an APM? It's a pretty popular one.
That's 3-4 people.
3, 4 people? Yeah, that's what we use because yeah, it's cheap. It's free basically. Grafana fans? Datadog?
I've enjoyed Datadog and I've played with it.
I've got someone that I have a lot of respect for that thinks Datadog is like the best thing since sliced bread. New Relic?
I've used it quite a bit.
Yeah.
Just love it.
Yeah, you like New Relic, you said?
Datadog.
Oh, Datadog.
Grafana.
One more
2
for
for
Grafana.
Grafana now.
Grafana, cool.
2.
Dynatrace?
Grafanas.
2 Grafana. Okay, so we've got some Grafanas, some Datadogs. Dynatrace? AppDynamics? Honeycomb? DigitalOcean? All right, so I've roughly got them ordered by popularity there. So APM tools are they're absolutely wonderful, but one of the problems that they had in the industry was that every single one of these APM tools had their own APIs and had their own way of communicating. And that was like not a big problem, except once you had a microservice. I mean, there's like vendor lock-in, which is one problem. Imagine you wanted to change from App Insights to Grafana or Grafana to Datadog or whatever, and you had a whole bunch of microservices out there. You would have to rewrite every single one of them. It would be really painful. Wouldn't it be nice if there was just one language that everybody spoke for telemetry? And so amazingly, all of the APM folks all got together and agreed to have an open standard that they would all speak telemetry information on. And I can't even imagine how this happened because I would imagine vendor lock-in is something that people would want, but I don't know as a vendor, but they all agreed. And so that's when OpenTelemetry was created. It's been around a couple of years now. So on my project, we're on App Insights, and so we actually had to delete all of our App Insights NuGet packages and replace them with OpenTelemetry. And I suspect there was plans to in fact get rid of the NuGet packages for App Insights, and so if that hasn't happened yet, I should probably know the answer to that by now. If that hasn't happened, it's going to happen, and so you should probably be prepared to rewrite your applications to use OpenTelemetry. If you aren't yet, it's coming to you. It's going to be forced on you sooner or later. I am fairly confident. So might as well do it now. And there's a spec out there. OpenTelemetry is wonderful, and it has a whole bunch of benefits. And one of them is that that is something that .NET Aspire speaks natively. And so there's a dashboard when you deploy Aspire. So this is the dashboard for this product here that I was showing you. And when it's running, let's see, we can go to the products. This is not using Kubernetes. This is using Azure Container Apps, which is a lightweight competitor to Kubernetes. I think container apps are wonderful. Okay. That's not the one I want to go to. I want to go to the store, and the store should have, oh, no, it is set up. There we go, open dashboard. So I'm just going to show you Aspire working in production. On my project, we actually didn't deploy Aspire to production. We just use it dev only because it's wonderful for dev. And we didn't really even, we're using our APM in production, but it's absolutely wonderful to run it locally. But I'm showing you an example here of it running in Azure. So once it's running in Azure, you can see all of your logs in one place. This is showing you the logs. In this case, we have a Redis cache. There is the back end and there is the front end. And in one place, I can see all of the logs across all of those services, which is absolutely wonderful. So I can see there were some errors here. And I'm going to get into traces a little bit later, but this is showing basically every single request as it's going across the services. So this was the request that I just did that remember, it took a little while. It took 6 seconds, actually. You can see it took 6 seconds, and you can see that it hit an error, and then it hit another error, then it hit another error. And so we had that resiliency policy, which was set up. So it hit that first one, it did a back off, it took a little bit longer the next time, and then it took a little bit longer the next time, and then eventually it got us successful. So our chaos monkey got us 3 times in a row, and then we got through. So that is, I'll get back to my presentation. Okay, here we go. So that is the Aspire dashboard running. And yeah, and oh, and you get console logs too, which is actually really nice as well. So you get your console logs, you get your regular logging if you're using Log4Net or whatever. And then traces and metrics.
So question about that. Would you, if you have open telemetry, even want to keep using your logger? Or would you just, does it offer the logging just as part of that? So you just inject the one iLogger instance and like get rid of Serialog, App Insights, all that other stuff, and just use this?
Good question. I still am a big fan of Serialog, so I use Serialog in production. Yeah, I would still use it, but what you do is you set up Serialog to connect to OpenTelemetry, and so then it's sending all of its log data through the OpenTelemetry system.
Oh, okay. So you would just add, just like you do with the APMs, you'd add serial.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is kind of the code that you would use. This is the code that you would use to do that. So you would add a reference to, well, actually, this is how you would set it up generally. And there's a little bit of extra code depending on which, if you're for Serialog, I'm going to show an example of that. There's a slide for that in just a little bit. But to set up the OpenTelemetry for logging, you include a couple of those package references there, the OpenTelemetry exporter, OpenTelemetry protocol, the extensions hosting, and then you enable OpenTelemetry by using Microsoft's favorite pattern, the builder pattern. So builder.logging.add OpenTelemetry like that, and you have the ability to customize it. And then you need to turn on use OLTP exporter. So I showed you traces very briefly. To turn those on, you would, and I'm showing you this like as if it's like something you would need to do, but when you Aspirify an application, this just happens. But I'm digging into the details right now. So you don't need to like memorize any of this code. I'm just kind of giving you a sense of like what Aspire is doing. And then I'm going to Aspirify an app in just a second so you can see how easy this is. Like this looks complicated, but it's really easy. It just happens for you automatically when you Aspirify. So to turn on so that's the structured logging was what I showed you last time. This in the last slide. This slide is how to turn on the tracing, which again is that like the entire request across all of your services. And so to do that, builder.services.add OpenTelemetry with tracing, and then tracing.add ASP.NET Core instrumentation, add HP client instrumentation, and then that's how you get that. And then the last piece I forgot to show you is metrics, but when we were doing all these requests here, we had the ability to say, let's take a look at our back end. And so we can see how many active requests. I guess we got up to 25 active requests. One connection, which looks like it's now closed. if I refreshed over here, I would have expected active connection to go up back to 1. Connection duration, queued connections. I don't know, maybe it's a little buggy right now, but that's the metrics. And so it's add OpenTelemetry dot with metrics, and you can, and then so it's like what do you want to turn on within that? So add ASP.NET Core instrumentation, add HTTP client instrumentation, add runtime instrumentation. This is what happens by default. You can turn on additional instrumentation if you want. So there's I'm always very interested in how much memory all of my services have. This does not give you memory by default, which is kind of annoying. There's a little bit of extra code that you need to do that, and hopefully I added a slide for that. No. I don't have a slide for that, but there's you can look out there. There's another NuGet package that you can add to get memory usage. Okay, it gets really awesome once you turn on database and once you get your database speaking OpenTelemetry. So to do that, you add, if you're using SQL Server, you would add OpenTelemetry instrumentation SQL client package reference, and then inside of your with tracing, then you add SQL client instrumentation, and then you are able, and this is where it gets amazing. This is now the point at which you can start seeing your queries inside of your traces. And we do this all the time on my project, and this is where it gets like absolutely amazing. So check this out. This is a request that took 302 milliseconds. And there was a connection to SQL Server that happened here, and then it did another query, and then another query. And so we like this is fast, but you can see that it actually did a whole, like Entity Framework did a whole bunch of connections back to the backend. And you can click on any one of these and see what the SQL was that it generated. So here's me, clicking on one of these, and you can see what SQL was generated. So that's amazing. And then once you've turned this on, it just happens automatically for you. So if you've deployed to Azure, now you don't in your APM gets this for free as well. So this is me taking a look in my production app, and you can take a look that this one query took 20 seconds. And you may be like, oh gosh, why is this taking so long? 20 seconds is a long time for a customer to have to wait. But you can dig into it and you can see exactly which query it was that took 20 seconds. Like 3 of these queries were really quite fast. So you click on that and now you can see which query it was that was taking a really long time. That's in production. That's fantastic. But we do it in PR reviews too. So I actually just wrote this. This is literally yesterday. I just added the screenshot. So insane in a bad way. I got a coworker who's absolutely brilliant. And he wasn't really, he wasn't thinking about performance in this particular instance. And so I was like, this seems a little slow. Opened it up in Aspire, and then I can see, look, this took 1.5 seconds. 1.5 seconds isn't terrible, but this one query that was just added in this PR ended up taking something that would have otherwise taken like super sub-second up to 1.5 seconds. And I was able to like add this in a PR, and it was like data. It was like, specific data that we both, it's like a language we both speak now. And he's like, oh, and then now he went, like he could see the same thing. And he's like, oh yeah, I could probably improve the performance of this query. So Aspire has just absolutely changed the way we do work. It's absolutely wonderful. So, yeah, I mean, in good ways too. So, this took 250 milliseconds, and I'm like, hey, this was great. Love it really fast. And then I just posted a screenshot. Okay, but then you can see crazy stuff like what's going on here. Check this out. This is an Aspire. This is an actual Aspire log. Anyone want to guess what's going on here?
Is it virtual scrolling?
Virtual scroll. That's a really good guess. It is not virtual scrolling. This is basically an n+1 selects problem. This was it's actually an import, but inside of the import, someone had a for each statement, and they were doing a whole bunch of queries to the database. So, ideally, instead of querying the database a gazillion times in here, you would just query it once, get all the data, and then work in memory. So you can see N+1 problems really clearly with OpenTelemetry. So I think that's really hot. I think OpenTelemetry is like the coolest thing ever. Okay, so let's go ahead and just do a demo. I think it's time. It is time to do a demo, right?
Yeah.
So
I did have one question.
yeah,
You
yeah.
mentioned, I saw that you wired up the health checks. And I know that there's like the health checks UI. So would you not use that and you would use OpenTelemetry's UX and UI instead?
For health checks, I would continue to use the health checks that it would provide.
No, the health checks UI though. Because you can say add health checks. So dot add health checks.
Mhm.
And then there's also dot add health checks UI, which gives you a very basic UI that shows you healthy, not healthy, and why. But would
Yeah.
you not use that if you were using Aspire and just use what Aspire gives you through the Azure backend? Or through the Azure UI?
Um, well, okay, on my current project, we don't have an orchestrator, we don't have Kubernetes, so we don't like have any need for liveness, and so we don't have anyone detecting it. So I just turned that off. But if liveness was important to me, I would use what Aspire gives you by default, and by default, it does actually turn on the the .NET endpoints.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll
Health
show
checks.
it. I'll show it to you. Yeah, it turns on the .NET health checks. I'll show that in just a second. Okay, so this is
There's another package that Microsoft talks about called Health Checks UI. That's part of Health Checks. But it sounds like you wouldn't need it if you were using Aspire.
this is a good question. I don't know if they turn that on by default.
You're already doing it twice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not familiar with that package. So I have a feeling this is too small of a code for everybody in person. Am I right? Can you like
I can
this is
zoom it if you're
I'll
not scrolling too much.
once I get to the code, I can zoom the code in here. So I can do that. This will be a little small. The modals will be a little small. I can try changing my resolution.
I'll show it to everyone so they can see at least the side for a moment.
Okay.
Did everyone see what it looked like before I unzoom it? Okay.
I could try. This might be a bad idea.
We're good.
We're good? Okay. All right. All right.
I zoomed in just so they could see. It's not like a lot to take in.
Yeah. So okay, so this is just like a really simple project called Tiny Shop. James Montemagno uses this as a starting point for his Spire presentations, and I figured if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. If I were to start this, if imagine I was a brand new developer starting on this project, I might not know what the difference is between products and store. So I would, let's see, I would like right click and set a startup project or like pro tip. I always, when I'm swapping around, I just right click and hit A because, I don't know, trying to navigate this menu is really slow. Before Aspire, when startup projects were important, I had that keyboard shortcut memorized in any event. So I'm going to start this one right here. This is products. I'm just going to kind of take a look at it and see what it is. And it looks like, oh, it's an error. And I can refresh a couple times. And oh, hey, here's actually some data. And okay, so that's that. Now, if I wanted to start the store, I could restart that. Now I could hit F5 and take a look at what the store is. Problem is, you know, if the store needs to be able to connect to the back end, it's probably going to fail because there's no back end, right? So I'm going to click on products and it's loading. It's never going to succeed because the back end isn't really running. So it's going to throw an error. So, typically the solution here would be like you set a startup project. I hit A. No, you can't from the solution. Anyway, you'd set a startup project and you could say, I want both of these to start at the same time in developer, and then that would work. But we can do better. This is one of the benefits of Aspire, right? So let's go ahead and Aspirify this. Let's start by Aspirifying. You generally Aspirify one thing at a time. By the way, I'm doing this through Visual Studio. I hope that's okay. It is by no means how you have to do it. There is an Aspire CLI. And so if you're in VS Code, or even if you're not even using .NET, Aspire works on like, Python projects and probably Java projects by this point. So you can use it in a variety of different contexts just from the CLI tool. But this is a .NET group, hopefully, so you're okay with me doing this in Visual Studio. It's extra fast and easy in Visual Studio, and so it makes the point, but it is easy to do from the command line as well. So to do this, right-click, add, and add .NET Aspire Orchestrator support. By the way, little pro tip right there. I'm going to cancel this out. There's two things that look very similar. Add application insights, telemetry, Aspire Orchestrator. Oh, actually, they removed it. There used to be a couple things that looked very similar. Anyway, .NET Aspire Orchestrator support is the one you want.
You're in
Give your
2026, right? Yeah, you're in 2026.
yeah yeah. Is actually anyone not in 26? There's like feels like there's no downsides to upgrading. Anyway, it's like identical in 22. 22?
So is there a naming convention that you're using?
Because of gave this to demo right before no, I can't. It's going to complain because in my on my hard drive there's already one, so I just have to give it a unique name. But is there a convention? I think it's whatever you want. So when I do this, it's now going to add two new projects, and it's going to call them, in this case, tinyshop3.apphost and tinyshop3.
So did you right
Service
click
defaults.
products, right? You right
I did
you
it.
right click product. So
I
can
did.
you not do it from the solution level? Like, do you have to choose something that is hostable in order to get that option?
Yes. You can't
Okay,
do it
and
from the
then you're
solution.
naming,
Yeah.
you're naming for all of them. It'll automatically detect what it needs to aspirify and combine all of that when it creates whatever it needs to create.
Not yet. So for right now, it's only going to aspirify product. So we'll have to hook up stores separately, and I'll show you in just a second how to do that. So the code that it added, if you're curious about it, let's see. I don't know. I'm actually super unfamiliar with now. How do you do this? Stack Trace Explorer. No, I don't want GitHub. Solutions Bar. Normally, I would use Git Kraken. I've like become so dependent on Git Kraken at this point that
Oh, you're good. You're looking
it's
for Git.
it's not starting. Yeah, I just wanted to show the changes. So here's the changes that it made. Okay, so it added service defaults, a reference to service defaults on my existing project. It made a new call to .add service defaults inside of program.cs of projects. And then it added an apphost.cs. It added a couple JSON files, and the app host itself, the CS proj, looks like this. So this is kind of interesting. I'm showing you behind the scenes. If you're interested in details, check this out. If not, don't worry about it. But there is a, did I get rid of it? Target framework, implicit usings, enable, user secrets. Oh, interesting. They got rid of it. Okay. There used to be a special, like magical field that they would add. It was like aspire host true or something like that. I guess that's not true anymore. I guess they got rid of it. Neat. Okay, so that's just sort of like quickly what they added. So this is the app host. This is the most important thing, right? This was the we're going to create a builder. We're going to add a project to it, products. We're going to give it a name called products, and then we're just going to call builder.build.run. And so if I F5 on the app host right now, you're going to see that dashboard. But we're only going to see it for the back end. So now I'm going to have to add, as Ari was pointing out, I'm going to have to add the front end. Okay, there it is. So there's our products, and can click on the URL. And now I can see what I was seeing before, which is I have to hit refresh a couple of times to get that through that chaos monkey. And now I'm seeing my data, and that's kind of cool. And I can see my traces. That's nice. These traces are just the back end part of it. And you can see this unhandled exception here. So there's that. Let's see the metrics. We can see our structured logs. This is really nice if I just want to be able to see just the errors. That's filtering to just the errors. I should probably upgrade to the latest version of .NET Aspire, but for some reason they don't default to that in the template. Whatever. Okay, so let's add the front end now. So to add the front end, it's even easier. Actually, I'm really tempted to just commit this. Hey, stage changes. So you'll be able to see more clearly the changes that it makes when I aspirify the front end. So aspirifying the front end is very similar. Add .NET Aspire Orchestrator support. Hey, we noticed that .NET Aspire Orchestrator, .NET Aspire already exists in the solution. We're just going to add it. Okay, cool. Let's do that. And now you can see it added add project for store. And if I'm looking at the list of changes here, it went into my store program.cs, and again, it added called add service defaults, and it called map default endpoints. I'll show you those in just a second. It added a reference from store to my service defaults project. And then the app host, I just showed you that already. It did that. And in the app host CS proj, it included a reference to store. Now, if you're taking a look at this code and you're like, wait a minute, where did this generic come from? I'm going to show you a little bit more behind the scenes. I find this super interesting because, like, where did that generic come from? If you hit F12 on it right now, it's going to take you into the obj folder inside of obj debug. So the compiler, probably Roslyn, generated a public class store. It basically detected all the things I made a reference to and made a class to represent each one of them, which I think is just kind of fascinating. It's just kind of interesting. Like, you don't need to worry about that. It doesn't matter, but it's just kind of interesting the way it works in the back end. So normally, if you were to want to get the service discovery to work, you would, after having called add project, you would now say add dot with reference and like that. And now that turns on service discovery so that anywhere inside of this project, if you wanted to make, instead of referring to this by port number, you can now just refer to it with http://store, which is really nice. I haven't actually done it, but that would be how you would do it. So now when I hit F5, that's it. I got them both running. It was that easy. Now I've got my store, and you can see it's connecting to the back end just fine. Here, F5 a couple times. Let's see if we can get a failure. There we go. Got a failure. I can go over to traces. Oh, that's kind of nice too. You can see that there was a server error log. You can jump right to the errors that way. You can go to the trace. You can see that this was an error over here. It took 4.5 seconds. You can see the error. And then this is a feature they released in a recent version, but it's actually Copilot enabled. So this is super cool. You click on Copilot, and it's like, hey, would you like us to investigate this for you? Like, sure, that'd be really nice. And so now this gives you a Copilot, like, nice human-friendly description of what happened. Hey, this was the duration. We detected an error. These were the resources. So multiple attempts to connect to product via both HTTP and HTTPS. There was this exception. It detected that the computer says no, thrown in. It tells you exactly where the error occurred. So you can just be like, oh yeah, I can go to products program.cs line 47. Copy that into your code and jump over to 47, and now I can see like exactly where the error was. So that's really nice. And then it'll tell you that there were 3 attempts that it made. It used poly for resilience, like I was talking about earlier. This was the first attempt, the second attempt, and then it succeeded on the third attempt. And then it kind of gives you some tips about like how you might want to resolve this and how you could fix it, which is pretty cool. I don't use this all the time, but sometimes this is really handy. So that's some of the Copilot integration, and that is it connecting with traces, and pretty much aspirified it in an extremely short amount of time. The real world aspirifying is a little more complicated, as you can imagine. It looks fast and extremely easy in a demo. The truth of the matter is that there are some difficulties if you are using Serialog. You have to connect up your Serialog to send its output out, as we were talking about earlier, to OpenTelemetry. That's a little bit of work. And if you are using Blazor Server, and you're not, this project uses Blazor WebAssembly. And so this is running in the client, just like if it was a React app or whatever. And so there's a dedicated HTTP request which goes to the backend that it detects. But if you're using Blazor Server, there's no HTTP requests, right? Like everything just sort of happens in process. And so there's no way to easily detect that this request occurred. So there's a little bit of extra code you have to turn on for telemetry to get this to show you the requests to the backend. So that's some of the real world problems that you're going to run into.
There is a question out there. Tim Coker asked, is the Copilot instance here aware of your code, or is it just working with data in the traces?
It is the same Copilot instance that knows about your code, but I've never actually seen it go into the code. I suspect that might be coming soon. It's a good question. Yeah, like it would be really nice if you could actually just like click on it and see the code here or something. I don't know. But yeah, no, I think it should have access to your code, but I've never actually seen it directly go into it.
So you would still get, so I notice you're getting all of the, all this telemetry, but I didn't see you wire anything special up. So is there something already wired up in the product and the store app where it's aware that it needs to send telemetry? Like, is it using like builder dot use open telemetry already?
It is. Yes, I'm so glad you asked. Great question. So that is where, remember I said there was 2 projects that come with Aspire. There's the app host, and then there's the service defaults. So the service defaults, each time you enable each project, it's making 2 calls in. We saw this here when I showed you here that my existing program.cs, it made a call into add service defaults, and it made a call into add map default endpoints. The first call here, add service defaults, calls configure OpenTelemetry. If I have 12 on that, you can see this is pretty much all the code that I showed in the OpenTelemetry slides as part of the presentation. It's calling builder.logging.add OpenTelemetry. Then it's calling add OpenTelemetry with metrics and with tracing. And so all that code was just added to your project. So it is worth getting familiar with what's in extensions.cs, because if you have an existing .NET project and you're ready to aspirify it, and you're worried about, what's it going to do to what's it actually doing to my project? This is what it's actually doing, all this code here. So it's worth taking a look at it and understanding it. But through the slides up until this point, I've pretty much showed you all this code. This is just pretty much all the best practices at this point. And in fact, it only even turns on a lot of these features if it's running in Aspire, in Aspire. So for instance, let's see. Actually, the configure OpenTelemetry should have done that. F12 into that. Add OpenTelemetry with metrics. Add source. All right, it's too zoomed in. I have to zoom out a bit. Okay, add OpenTelemetry exporters. So this line right here, add OpenTelemetry exporters, is saying, is there a configuration value called OLTP export or OLTP endpoint? If yes, then call builder.services.add OpenTelemetry to use OLTP exporter. In other words, if this doesn't exist, if I were to take this code right now and just deploy just the store and the products, this value wouldn't exist. And so the OpenTelemetry wouldn't even be turned on. And in fact, my project that I'm been on for a couple of years now, right now, we don't even, this is in our code, but it's not doing anything. Actually, no, actually we turn this on, so it is doing something. But if we hadn't, then the OLTP exporter wouldn't even be turned on. So, okay, so that's the configure OpenTelemetry. Okay, you were talking, Ari, about the default health checks. So there's two parts of it. This one right here calls add health checks with self. And then the second part of that is there is the map default endpoints, which if we're in development, then it turns on those external endpoints. Now, what would be interesting is whether it makes a reference to what was the package you were talking about?
Oh, health checks UI. But it's not referencing it.
Okay, so it's not there.
Oh, if there's a question in the audience, can you hear him?
No, I couldn't hear.
But here's into these packages getting added. So let's say, if you decide if you want to use Redis or you don't want to use Redis, for example. I thought that was one of the things that you could just kind of add in there. They're normally NuGet packages. But when do they get added? Are they in there when you don't want them? Or are they only going to get installed when you've set in the code to add them? How does that work?
Did you hear that?
The audio was really choppy. It's about if you add Redis. I'm sorry, can you repeat?
If a NuGet package get added, or
When-
is it a NuGet package still?
When does the NuGet package for Redis get added? Or is there even I would think it's only if you added the support for it.
But I mean, all you're doing is type line of code. How does it know you want a package? And when does it make a reference?
Oh, so
Just remove the reference.
I think he's asking, and stop me if I'm wrong, that if he's already using Redis, Redis in one of his projects, when it is Aspire-ified, will it bring in the appropriate, package to support Redis in the Aspire configuration or not? Right?
I mean, it's kind of on it, but I really just want to know when do packages get added or removed if you're doing it in code. Right? If you're referencing Redis in code, saying you want to .add Redis, when does it know it has?
In Aspire?
So you have to go get the package yourself, and then it becomes available. The
Yeah,
.add.
it's still all code.
It's like OpenTelemetry. He just added it, but did he have to go get a NuGet package?
Oh, I got it. I think, okay, so the reason OpenTelemetry works is as part of the template when it Aspire-ifies everything. That's part of the template to bring in those packages. So OpenTelemetry would be one of them, as you can see right there. So that gets installed, but it didn't intelligently do that. That's just part of the template.
Right.
And then what it did, it also added as part of its maybe macro or script, whatever you want to call it, the 2 lines of, oh, I know that there's this project you want to add, and it added that line. But it didn't go intelligently go, oh, I see in this project that you're using Redis. So I'm also going to enable all the Redis stuff. It didn't do any of that. It just simply added the basic orchestration.
Yeah, but so.
Did I get that right?
That's true. That's true, but there's a whole part of my presentation about Redis. So it might be good to hold off on that question just a little bit. But when I get to the section on modules, there's a whole bunch of Aspire modules out there, and there's one specifically for Redis. And you wouldn't, by default, you wouldn't get that. So you would have to, if you wanted to opt your Redis into OpenTelemetry, you would have to do some extra work to add the NuGet package to get OpenTelemetry support for Redis. If you have an existing project that doesn't have Redis and you want to add Redis, your life is like so much easier because you can just right click and you can say add and sorry, no, you do this to the, actually, I'm gonna get into how you do it later. I've got it in the slides so I can get through it more quickly, but
So
it will,
let me do
it will, it will add it and make
let me
sure
do a
it's
time
OpenTelemetry friendly.
check. Gotcha. Let me do a time sandy check. How many more slides do we have? Because it's 8:12.
I can get through the slides pretty quickly, actually. So yeah,
Oh,
I
I'm not
can,
trying to hurry you up. I'm just trying to figure out how much time you've got and then how is everyone looking like 8:30? Okay with everyone? Okay. So yeah, I think we got another like 15 to 17 minutes.
cool. Okay.
Some people have long drives home.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. Believe me.
It's all very interesting.
Yeah, this is the part of the presentation which we can go into as much or as little depth as you're interested in. But I should at least point out a couple things. If you are looking at this and thinking about your existing project, all of the code in here is actually super safe. There's only one thing that you should be really concerned about, and that is the code here that turns on the standard resilience handler. I was singing its praises earlier because the standard resilience handler is it is best practices. It's a good idea. But if you're taking this onto your existing project, and let's say that you are, like on my project, we have a legacy app that uses SOAP services that we have to connect to. I don't remember SOAP services. And so, yeah. Well, imagine that I made a SOAP service request, and that fired the missiles. And now that is down, but it returned an error. And now I pause and restart, and now I do another SOAP service request that fires the missiles. And it actually fired the missiles, but it returns an error. Now I've fired missiles 3 times, and there was no transaction support with that. And so I think this is the one thing that should just give you a little bit of pause, and you really should think about this in terms of how you're interfacing with your external dependencies, and if you have transactions enabled, and if you don't, maybe just give that a little bit of thought. So I think that's probably good enough to get back to the slides and finish out this presentation. All right, so I want to talk about I saved deployment for absolute last because it's not that important to Aspire. Like Aspire is great when you're using it in your dev environment, I think. And like on my project, again, we didn't even send it up to, we didn't send Aspire up to production. Good enough without it, but
You're gonna get to it, but does it simplify deployment?
it can.
Oh, okay.
It can.
You'll get to it. I got you.
Yep, it can. Okay, let's talk about server integration. So imagine you've got a project that doesn't have Redis and you want to add Redis. So what you can do is you can add Aspire to your app host. So you add a NuGet package to aspire.hosting.redis. Microsoft has combined a lot of like best practices into Aspire dot packages. And so you can add the server integration, aspire.hosting.redis. And once you add that, then you can call in your app host, you can call builder.add That extension method was added for you by adding that NuGet package there. And then you can even call things like .with Redis commander, .with persistence. You can configure everything about your Redis when it's running locally in your app host anyway, right here. And that's really, really nice. And you can do .with reference, and that turns on OpenTelemetry included. So it's not just Redis, but it's like Redis with the OpenTelemetry all working, which is really nice. I talked about how that automates Docker desktop. So this, in this case, would download the Docker image and then fire up a container. And then also enables Redis Commander. So then you've got Redis Commander here, and you can like connect into your Redis and take a look at your keys and what your values are, and that's really nice. So that would not actually do anything quite yet because you would need to have Aspire, you would need to have Redis connected and actually used, but they make an Aspire for client integrations as well. So now that you've added it to your app host and you've got Redis fired up every time you hit F5, now you need to use it. To do that, you can add aspire.stackexchange.redis and aspire.stackexchange.redis. If you want to turn on output caching, for instance, then you can turn on the output caching NuGet package. Then you can call builder.add Redis output cache and give it again the name that you defined in app host. That's really nice. Use app output caching. And then just like I showed you in the project that I had running up in the cloud, this is now got your cache, your Redis commander, and you can see the requests. Even you can go directly into the cache setx and get commands, and you can see all of those directly in your traces, which is just absolutely wonderful. So you can see whether or not it hit the cache or whether it needed to go and fill up in the cache. So that's super hot. There are a ton of, it's not just Redis, like there's a ton of different Aspire packages which you can include. Sorry, was a question there?
I didn't hear one.
So, okay, so that's there's that could be a whole section I could talk about for a while. There's a whole bunch of other things as well, but so like I said, you can just deploy as is. You don't need to use Aspire to deploy, but if you wanted to, there is a command called azd deploy. That was how I deployed the demo app that I showed for this presentation. Azd deploy just looks in your app host, looks at all that nice strongly typed stuff, converts it all internally into a big JSON file, I think, and then takes that and deploys it up into Azure Container Apps. Azure Container Apps, again, is sort of like the simple version of Kubernetes, which you should be using, probably not Kubernetes. I would say use Container Apps if you are needing container orchestration. So, and then that just works, and it's like ridiculously easy. And now you might be asking, okay, Lee, that was easy, but would I ever actually do that for my real projects? And the answer is like, nah, probably not. It's really good for a demo. It really looks fantastic and like extraordinarily easy. But supposing you wanted to add VNets, like I want a VNet so that my store and my products connect, and my products and my cache can connect, but my store can't connect to my cache or whatever. If you want to do like more complicated scenarios like that, they've also actually got you covered. To do that, you can use a command called azd infrasynth. Azd infrasynth will output a bunch of bicep files, and you can take those bicep files and run those yourself for Azure, and you can customize them. You can add in your own VNets or whatever, do whatever changes you need. So that's pretty cool. And then if you need to, you can go into your app host, and they actually have a lot of customizations that you can do so that they might even have VNets at this point. So you don't have to like go in and modify the resources of that bicep. But if you really want a lot more control, this is the way to go, AZD infrasynth, and it will make your deployment much easier.
So question on that one.
Yeah.
And then Tim also had a question. I'm seeing that it pushes out a container, but for example, what if I had a Blazor app and then I had like a functions project? I'm not gonna put the functions inside of a container. So can I deploy? Can I get all these benefits using like an app service and Azure Functions instance, or am I required to use containers if I'm going to use Aspire and this deployment? Because it looked like that was a requirement.
I believe that if you're using Azure Functions, you can use them with containers. But that wasn't really your question. Do you have to use containers? If you're doing the deployment and you
Just
wanted
don't know
to
how that
use,
scales. I don't know how Azure Functions would scale if it's in a container.
It'll
Because
probably just be a little bit.
it wouldn't be in multiple regions automatically. I'd have to have containers in multiple regions. Instead of just saying, the cool slider in Azure Functions, here's how much I want you to scale. Which I can't, I can do that. I don't think I could do that with a container. I'd have to pay for each container instance.
That is probably true. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the answer. That would be a fun homework project.
Okay. Oh, and Tim had a question.
Yep.
Something else to be aware of, or maybe it might not be a question, it might be a statement. Something else to be aware of with the deployment scenario is they're intentionally targeting an agnostic intermediary language or construct that any third party is welcome to implement, i.e. it's not tied to Azure/Microsoft. The Azure team is themselves consuming this language for the deployment scenario. The future is honestly pretty frickin' bright for Aspire, especially with Fowler pushing hard for Aspire itself to be language agnostic.
Absolutely true. Well said. Well said. Totally agree. Yeah, if you there was a recent .NET Rocks on Aspire with Maddie, which is worth listening to. The signal to noise ratio wasn't great, but it was still interesting. And she talked about the deployment scenario for deploying to AWS. It's like, oh wow, cool. That's neat. Yeah, that was a great point. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wind down here. So this was my presentation on Aspire. Talked about reducing complexity, increasing resiliency. My personal favorite, observability, and then the modularity piece and the deployment briefly. So thank you all for coming out. Really appreciate it. My name is Lee Richardson. These slides are here. I got a link to the Prezi. I'm mostly, I guess, on LinkedIn these days, but there's a Blue Sky and YouTube, and I blog to leerichardson.com when I have, which I haven't for a little while, but that's all I got. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. Hey, it looks like there's a question from Ryan Latrell and Shrivan. So Ryan, I think was first. So Ryan, if you're off mute, you can just ask. Now he's on mute. So hopefully he's not asking right now because we can't hear him. All right, now he's off mute.
Can I ask a question? This is Shravan.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
So in our setup, we have AWS as the cloud provider, and in the backend we have a bunch of microservices, some .NET based, some Node.js based, and we have Datadog for observability. So what we normally tend to do is for our backend apps, we have a Datadog log forwarder, and it basically forwards all our logs that we write in our backend that are written to CloudWatch logs, and pushes them to our Datadog dashboards. And we index them, and we basically create dashboards with widgets and queries and so on and so forth. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around where does .NET Aspire fit in, and what additional benefits it would bring for this kind of setup.
Well, it's worth keeping in mind that .NET Aspire is a bunch of different things. And so maybe you're asking about whether open telemetry would provide any benefits. I mean, I think you're liable to need to switch to open telemetry sooner rather than later if you haven't yet. So that is probably coming, and .NET Aspire might just help give you a nice dashboard when you're in development, not when you're in production.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So would you recommend then, if you're, to that point, should you be using, another APM such as, a Datadog or Application Insights, etc., instead of thinking that you're going to rely on Aspire's dashboard and just use, it just seems like, and it was really cool to see all the stuff you were showing, but then it sounds like there's some limitations there, and you might be better off using, a different solution and just use open telemetry for all the, you know, the glitz and glamour.
Yeah, ideally you want to use OpenTelemetry in production and locally. You want to use the .NET Aspire locally, and then you want to use your Datadog or App Insights in production. But your OpenTelemetry is in all environments. It just happens to be using the Aspire dashboard if you're running it locally.
Gotcha.
And you could use, theoretically, I mean, people love the .NET Aspire dashboard so much that there apparently have been a lot of requests to get that to run in production. I think you can do that. Like I guess I showed earlier in the demo, you could make that your actual APM, I guess, if you wanted to, but it doesn't, the data doesn't live for very long. So it's got a rolling log and it eventually all disappears.
Details. Someone said not to mention security.
I suppose that's true, although, yeah, I mean, yeah, I can't speak to that. I mean, I would assume that it's all over HTTPS with the OpenTelemetry standard. So that
It's
part's
just,
connected.
like, it's just open, so you can see, possibly sensitive data that shouldn't be exposed.
You have to mention, there's no masking of anything in those
Yeah.
queries and stuff.
So you can see the
You see
yeah.
everything.
username and password if someone plain text it. Not that
Yeah,
anyone-
your attack service. Yeah, you're right. Your attack service is a little bit better if you've got that dashboard. Is a little bit bigger if you've got that dashboard. Now you've got to worry about securing your dashboard. That's true.
Got it. Okay, so then Aspire is great for development purposes in that sense. But then as long as you're enabling, open telemetry in the builder in all your other projects, then you would route the open telemetry to Datadog and so forth, whoever you chose as your APM. But would open telemetry automatically also in the local dashboard when debugging capture all that telemetry? Like if I said, okay, I'm using open telemetry and I'm using use Datadog, then when I launch the Aspire project, does it override that so it doesn't go off to Datadog and such? Or is that special configuration?
Yes. So when you're running locally, it will send the data to Aspire, and then when you're running in production, you have to put in a little bit of extra code to make sure it's getting sent to Datadog or wherever.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
But it's still all open telemetry in both cases.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the standard. That's the common language. Got it. Okay.
When you're running Aspire locally, everything is running with your machines. Well.
Yeah. So like when you deploy to production, you're not deploying an Aspire project. So if you've got like CI/CD set up, you're still deploying those individual projects or all of that, and you wouldn't deploy the Aspire project. So they would already be configured for Datadog, whatever they can. But locally, which is really cool, rather than having that multiple startup project stuff, you just set the startup project to the Aspire project. And then you run that, which is really nice if you're getting new developers started, because it's just a cluster, getting them set up sometimes to launch the environment just the right way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I mean,
Yeah, well put.
did you try any other projects that do a similar thing as Aspire, or have you, as a tool discovery, just kind of fell into the Aspire and Microsoft suite? Like, feels like this work.
Yeah.
That is.
Now, the question was, have you tried anything else, before using Aspire or in lieu of Aspire? And I think that the answer from the audience was you used Kubernetes first.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, but yeah.
What
Yeah,
was
I don't think
that?
there's anything. I don't think there's any other competitors out there to have done at Aspire, even in other frameworks. Like I've heard a lot of jealousy that other people in other stacks have had with Aspire, and the answer is, hey, Aspire works for you too if you wanted to.
Got it. So aspire means aspire to have a better development experience.
Yes, I like that.
I
Awesome.
got you. All right, anyone else have any questions? All right, thanks, Lee. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And
All
that
right,
sounds
thanks for
like
having me.
your PowerPoint slides are available at the link, the Prezi. And then could you send me that link and then I'll add it to the meetup page?
Yeah, you bet.